Before a prisoner's execution, the prisoner is typically given a moment to say something. Sometimes they use this time to express their apologies to their victims' families or their own. Yet, there are those death row inmates whose last words are bizarre and disturbing. Here is a list of death row inmates' most disturbing last words, including the last words of an inmate who inspired the slogan for Nike. Like and subscribe for more videos. John Wayne Gacy, one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. John Wayne Gacy was responsible for the murder and sexual assault of over 30 men in Illinois during the 1970s. Gacy fooled everyone around him since he performed at children's hospitals as Pogo the Clown and had a hand in politics, once meeting First Lady Rosalind Carter. After Gacy was caught and investigators discovered his victims' bodies under the crawl space of his house, Gacy was sentenced to death. On May 10, 1994, Gacy was executed. When asked if he had any last words, the former clown responded, "Kiss my ass." George Apple. Despite George Apple's last words before his execution being somewhat humorous, his heinous crime was far from funny. George Apple was convicted of the first-degree murder of a police officer in the 1920s. He was executed on August 9, 1928, by the electric chair in New York City. Before the executioner turned on the electric chair, George Apple said with a chuckle, "Well, gentlemen, you are about to see a baked apple." Thomas J. Grasso. Thomas J. Grasso, 32 years old at the time of his execution, was on death row for 2 murders. In 1990, he murdered an older woman with her Christmas lights, and only 6 months later stabbed an older man to death for his Social Security check. Executed by lethal injection in 1995, Thomas J. Grasso's last meal consisted of steamed clams and mussels, a cheeseburger from Burger King, 6 spare ribs, pumpkin pie and whipped cream, 2 milkshakes, and SpaghettiOs. The guards gave Thomas spaghetti instead of SpaghettiOs, which deeply upset him. Thomas was so upset by this mistake that he used his last words to tell the world about it. "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer would visit gay bars, gay libraries, the local mall, and walk the streets looking for victims. He would then invite them to his apartment to have sex or a drink. He would also lure them by offering them money to pose for some photos. When an intended victim managed to escape and call for police, he led 2 officers to the apartment. They arrested Dahmer and uncovered several grisly items in the apartment, such as photographs of mangled bodies, 4 skulls in the refrigerator, several dismembered organs and bodies, blue barrel vats containing whole bodies, neatly wrapped strips of human flesh in the refrigerator, and a barrel containing 3 human torsos. Dahmer was charged with 15 murders and sentenced to 957 years in prison, and served his time at the Columbia Correctional Facility in Portage. On November 28, 1994, he was beaten in the prison gym with a dumbbell by another inmate. When the altercation started, Dahmer stated, "I don't care if I live or die. Go ahead and kill me." He later died on the way to the hospital. Robert Alton Harris. On July 5, 1978, Robert Alton Harris and his brother kidnapped 2 teenage boys. The boys were at a fast food restaurant when Robert and his brother forced them to drive to a remote area. Robert shot both boys and stole their car, later using it for a bank robbery. After the theft, the men were arrested. Despite denying he had anything to do with the murders, Robert was sentenced to death in the gas chamber. Robert was the first person executed since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. Before he was executed, Robert gave his last words at San Quentin Prison in 1992. He said, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper." Eileen Wuornos. One of the most infamous female serial killers, Eileen Wuornos, shot and killed 7 men in Florida. According to Eileen, she killed the men in self-defense when they attempted to rape her when she worked as a prostitute. Eileen was eventually caught when she pawned 2 items from her victims and left her fingerprints on them. On October 9, 2002, Eileen was executed by lethal injection. Eileen's last words were disturbing and strange. She said, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all, I'll be back." James French. In 1958 Texas, James French murdered a hitchhiker. While serving time in prison in 1961, he strangled his cellmate to death, earning himself the death penalty. Allegedly, French wanted to die, but was afraid to kill himself, so he killed someone else to get the death penalty. On August 6, 1966, James French was executed in Oklahoma. Since he was about to die in the electric chair, James French decided to be humorous during his last moments on Earth. He said, "How about this for a headline for tomorrow's paper? French fries." Gary Gilmore, he was the death wish killer who pleaded to be allowed to face a firing squad, and his final words before he was shot inspired one of the world's best-known marketing slogans. Gary Gilmore was executed in Utah State Prison in 1977 after being sentenced to death in October 1976 for the murder of a motel clerk. Unlike most death row inmates, Gilmore had famously demanded to be killed as soon as possible. In the seconds before he got his wish, his final words were, "Let's do it." In 2015, advertising executive Dan Whedon said that Gilmore's words had inspired him to dream up sportswear giant Nike's famous "Just Do It" slogan. Thanks for watching, and if you know any more disturbing, bizarre, or even humorous last words, let us know in the comments section.